on whenever you're in the mood.
You're live.
We're live. Okay, good morning everybody.
Good morning.
It's a little cooler this morning.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I don't even mind wearing my jacket. Okay, so we call the meeting to order, and we respectfully acknowledge that we live and work in Mi'kmaq. As steward of the ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, we are all treaty people. I have nothing to add to the agenda myself. Don't know if it's Tina.
Footsteps of Canadian Heroes event.
Okay.
I have I don't know if it got added, I don't think it got added to the agenda. Nicholas Buckle sent the letter in, just, it was in regards to the Walrose Park upgrades. He wasn't able to make the meeting, so I'd like to read just the email if I could.
Okay.
Yep.
Anything else?
Just the roundabout in Marriott's Cove. I would like to know when the signs are going up or crosswalk. I was told it wasn't their highway's responsibility, so it's our responsibility. So I know that people are calling me. They haven't been up in a long time.
I thought we have the signs that
They were putting them up.
they were putting up.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
great. When,
yeah.
maybe they'll let me know when they put them up.
Well, they know that they're doing. That we
Okay.
should find out when we met with them.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Somebody want to move the approval as amended?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Oh, motion's carried. 15 minutes public input. Anybody wish to speak to council? Yep. Name and civic address as usual.
Pardon
Name and civic address as usual.
me? Sure.
Even though we all know anyway.
Oh, sorry. Hi. Is this on?
Press the button.
Good morning. My name is Susan Crocker. I live at 67 Water Street. Thank you for letting me make just a couple of brief comments. Warden, council members, staff, thank you. I wish to comment on three things related to the planning bylaw for Chester. First of all, accessory dwelling units. I left the public meeting last week buoyed by the strength of the community consensus around no to accessory dwelling units. It is so clear to the residents and taxpayers of this village that density beyond what is permitted under current bylaws is in conflict with the sustainability of village life due to water issues and also the lack of clarity around resources to address other basic infrastructure needs. I feel strongly that punting this issue to the future is not the answer, that your constituents have spoken, and the test of leadership on your part is to demonstrate that you've listened and understand. Remove accessory dwelling units and redirect planning resources to properly assess our actual resource capacity to support growth. Or better yet, move on to other planning priorities that will strengthen the village. On zoning, the presentation package for this meeting isn't fully consistent with the request from the impacted residents and property owners. The petition that we submitted last week asks that all of Water Street be zoned residential, as only one property, the Rope Loft, is a commercial operation. This residential street is one of the top tourist attractions in the village because of the charm, the consistency with the desired built form and heritage character of the village, and the investment made by all residents in their homes and gardens. What is proposed doesn't make sense, is offensive, and I hope that you have questioned this recommendation. I can only guess, as I mentioned last week, that this decision to rezone commercial was based on no observation of the street in its current built form. At the meeting last week, the same consideration was requested for Valley Road, which is also residential. My guess is that those residents were similarly unaware that their world was changing without their direct engagement. STRs. It's impossible to have a conversation about housing challenges and density without addressing short-term rentals. Chester is not unique. Every desirable seasonal destination in the world has now suffered the housing dislocation caused by the introduction and growth of STRs, which have shifted the math in favor of short-term versus long-term rentals. STRs have hollowed out Chester to a degree. Year-round residents see the impact in the form of empty homes in the off-season and no housing for essential staff and employees. I observed the council meeting last Thursday morning where, to my dismay, staff reported to council that the standard of the province on this front was good enough, and further, that engagement with constituents, specifically the owners of the short-term rentals, would result in a plan that was tourism supportive. Engagement has got to involve the people who live with this, a community that has to function year-round to be healthy economically, and the standard has to be higher than that set by the province because we are a target for short-term rentals. Why are we being so casual about this? Good governance, good policy has to start with a vision and first principles for a sustainable Chester. Then the development criteria are developed that reconcile with these parameters. It keeps feeling like we're focused on the other end of the process, which is the development interests. Please set the goal higher. Finally, to experience the meeting last week with a very committed council that includes only one representative for the village, one councillor who lives with the day-to-day joys of living here and challenges, felt like an imbalance. And I just hope that one day we can soon have that conversation about representation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just have one quick statement. Peggy Wilson, 59 Main Street, Chester. In 2022, there was a build, form, and character defining element study of the Village of Chester. In the discussion document that went with that, there was a statement called Stakeholder Community Engagement. I feel that you saw that firsthand last week. A lot of people are very concerned about what's happening here in terms of accessory dwelling units that are not wanted, the core commercial, which is not wanted, duplexes that need to be redefined as to how we're going to go forward with duplexes. It's not that we don't want them, but we want it to be so structured that people understand where they can be, where they can't be, and how many can be. So I hope that you really do listen to what everybody said last week, because I feel that we poured our hearts out to you last week, and that respectfully, please listen. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more person. Yeah. It was already on.
Oh, it's already on. Yes, good morning. My name is Jim Gordon. I'm in the proposed R4 zone. I live at 3962 North Street. I've already written Councillor Wells regarding some of my very limited concerns regarding the plan, and have no intention of covering a lot of the issues that I have raised. But I guess my key message here is that I really feel we have to get back to basics here. I really feel that the initial meetings I saw a lot of issues regarding the landscape, so-called, and housing types. And it's almost as if there's too much in here for too many people. And I think we have to take the essence of what Chester is about, as I understand it too, as a resident here. It's a special and relatively small area, I feel, for the sort of development that is proposed here. When you look at most residents that I speak to, our demographics, as I see it in the plan, don't substantiate. I see many flaws in the plan. When you look at the ongoing water shortage issue, other environmental issues who have been raised by several people, climate change, that is looming amongst all of us. And the implicit increase in population that goes with this plan. I think we're pushing the envelope. So I say, why in this plan do we want to add more development and more people with these existing problems that are not going to be going away? I am speaking from a resident of R4. I've never spoken to council on issues before since I've been here, but I do feel strongly about it. Things may be different in Bridgewater, Mahone Bay, or many other places, but let's keep track of what I feel Chester was about, having spent many years here during my lifetime. I think it's a chance to make this opportunity to count, get back to basics, and move on from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll just go over the time. Is there anyone else who has a few moments to speak? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting, committee of the whole, July 4th. Errors or omissions?
I will be approved the minutes.
Seconder? Sorry. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Public, that's until 9:30. Okay, Matters Rise Village, Chester Strategic Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw discussion. Karen.
Good morning, Council.
Yeah.
Oh, just before, I thought Alan wanted to speak in the public session, and he didn't know you wanted to speak in the public session.
Yes.
Sorry, he didn't.
Sorry, I came a little late. I apologize for that, but.
Yeah, I kind of thought he wanted to.
Okay, sorry, you didn't see your hand, so I didn't know you wanted to.
Okay. I live in Western Shore, and I live right adjacent to the highway number 3. The area from the Island View Canteen to the fire hall has yet to be paved or constructed. And I have tried in conversations with the MLA, with DIR, and everybody else. We're getting serious flooding happening there because the highway culverts are all collapsed. The engineer during the project in 22, after the MLA fought with him for about a half hour in the pouring rain to repair the culvert, his solution was to put a 15-inch culvert into a 24-inch culvert. And on the park side of the highway, on that same culvert, it blew out during the storm, and the public works, I would assume, from the park, put another piece of culvert in there, undersized, and the house beside me and our property continues to get flooding. There's also flooding by the Frank Swinnerman Road up by the Island View Canteen, and also at the fire hall because of the culvert size. I understand they can't go ahead with the project because Bell refused to do anything about the fiber cable. That's not acceptable. 2.5 years, the engineer told me in 22 that the fiber problem would be corrected in February of 23. That didn't happen, and there seems to be no movement on getting this resolved at all. Considerable expense by my neighbor and myself has occurred because of this flooding area. Now, the housing, no social housing, are putting a new driveway into their property in front of their building, and they're going to be putting another 12-inch culvert to add to the water going in that culvert. And the wisdom of the engineer during the project put a culvert right across my property, which was in the middle of a collapsed culvert that went across the road. And there's nothing done. Someone has to take ownership of this and get it moving. And I suggested council, I don't know what you gotta do, but you gotta do something. And I understand the park is gonna be revamped or whatever, And you need to correct all that before you can go ahead with that. It's just gonna be a waste of money. Anyhow, that's my view on it.
Okay, thank you much. I know that we brought it up about it so many times.
Can I get your name?
Alan Swinnerman, 4 Young Road.
Just for the record.
Okay.
Okay, we're moving on, Gareth.
All right, so following up on the public hearing last week when a decision was deferred on the new planning documents, we are back to discuss where we go from here. And we will need some sort of a decision today with some direction from council as to how to proceed. So just to jump right into it, I'm short and sweet with the slides here. So this is a list of, I think, the key concerns and issues that were expressed at the public hearing. And then, of course, anything else the council wants to discuss as well, we can do. So I thought we'd just kind of go through them one by one. And discuss. So I can go to the next slide, please. So the first one obviously was density, accessory dwelling units, and water. We heard strongly that there were a lot of concerns with additional, or with the accessory dwelling unit being permitted in the R1 and R2 zone. The R1 zone does currently allow a second dwelling unit, and it has since 2004, so there's no change proposed in that zone, but we heard that that was not desired. And the R2 zone, that is true that the accessory dwelling unit was something new in the R2 zone. So the calls were to remove accessory dwelling units, as you heard again this morning, and also either to not allow duplexes or to more tightly regulate them. Again, just for clarity, there's a lot of misunderstanding with the current documents or downplaying of what the current documents allow. Currently in the R2 zone, every house that's older than 2004 could be converted into a duplex, as well as the provision that most people are familiar with, which is 1 duplex per block. So currently most buildings in the village could be converted into a duplex. So under the current bylaw. And we've tried to explain that, but the residential conversion piece, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to be understood as well as the 1 duplex every block.
But one more time, all existing dwelling units
in our
that have been constructed prior to 2004, which is almost all of them, can be converted to a duplex today.
Correct. Additionally,
if you were going to build new, you can build 1 new duplex per
block. That's right. Right.
So those 2 things exist.
That's right. And similarly in R1, the second dwelling unit, it's not called an accessory dwelling unit, but 1 600 square foot second unit is already allowed in R1 today. So adding an accessory dwelling unit to R1 is no change from what's there today. So that's another piece that's really misunderstood about the density that's proposed in this plan. But we heard duplexes and ADUs were not wanted. No increase in density, single units across the board was the bulk of what we heard. So these options, of course, are just options for discussion. We can go anywhere else this morning, wherever council would like. These are some that, between myself and the CAO and my director, we thought were in the range of what council might wish to consider. It's hard to read mine, so I don't know what you guys are going to give you there. So these are just for consideration, just to get the conversation started. So the first option would be to say no options for duplex going forward. We would allow only a single unit dwelling plus 1 accessory dwelling unit per lot. That would be both in the R1 and R2 zone. So the R1 zone would effectively have no change from today. The R2 zone, we would take out the 1 duplex per 90 or per block and the conversions from 2004, and we would say it's only single unit dwellings, but you can have that accessory dwelling unit. So that would be one option.
That's the first one there?
That's the first bullet point there. Secondly, we could just scrap the accessory dwelling unit entirely, which again, we did hear calls to do. That would mean in R1, where today you can have single unit dwelling plus a second unit, you could only have a single unit dwelling go forward. So there'd be a lot of legal non-conforming uses in the R1 zone, all those second units that exist today. Yeah, they'd exist today, but nobody else would be able to do any new ones. And then of course in in the R2 zone, we would take out the accessory dwelling units. And then, so these are all kind of combinations of the similar kinds of ideas. And then sort of the most restrictive or the most significant change from what the draft says would be the third bullet, which would be to say in both R1 and R2, all you can do is one single unit dwelling per lot, no accessory dwelling units, no duplexes. And that would be both in R1 and R2. So the only difference in that case between R1 and R2 would be the minimum lot sizes and the yard setbacks and those kind of things. So I think that kind of covers the gambit if we are talking about reducing the density of what's proposed.
Let's assume we're gonna not increase the density. Okay, you can reduce it, increase it, or leave it the same.
Right.
If we have option 1, would that leave it the same?
The only way to leave it the same is to literally leave that existing thing about existing buildings since 2004. If we were talking literally the same, you have to leave what's written because there's so many, no, but because it's one per block and no more than one every 90 meters, that's a calculation that has to be done every time a new duplex is sited.
Yeah.
That's for new ones, that's not
That's
for
right.
the pre-2004 ones.
Right, but if the question is how do we keep it the same as it is now, that combination of complicated rules are such that I don't think we can duplicate it unless we keep the exact same
Just
rules.
leave it
Yeah,
exactly
just leave it as it is. I don't think it's equitable in that it benefits property owners that have older homes versus newer homes. It also, if the one new duplex per lot is already taken, then that means nobody else can do it. But yeah, if the desire is to keep it as it is, I would say let's keep it as it is. Why rewrite it? Why not just leave
What would
it?
option 1 do? Do you think it would increase density or decrease density? I mean, it depends what people decide to do, of course, but I mean, at the potential now.
I would say it's about a wash. It's about, and this is roughly, this is not exactly the same, it's about the same. Because if we say that currently in R1, every lot in R1 can have a second dwelling unit. And in R2, currently, most could be converted to a duplex. Then if we say single unit plus an ADU, we're still talking about 2 units to 2 units, basically.
But on the ADU, was not the intention in the licensing bylaw to prevent Airbnb?
It was, and if
So that
council,
would in fact reduce density.
I think it would reduce the uptake of people that would look to build them. And if council recalls, we had that discussion. We initially, in this document, had regulations for short-term rentals proposed, and we were actually going quite strongly in favor of regulating them. We had it to the point that you actually had to be the primary residence. And we heard loudly and clearly in our public engagement that that was not what this community wanted, that we would ruin the junior sailing program, that Chester has a long history of short-term rentals that long predates Airbnb, and if we were to do that, that would actually change the character. So that's why that's been pulled out now. That's why we don't have regulations, and that's why there's a new document that's coming forward.
We're dealing with that in a separate.
Exactly. That's the answer to that question.
And there will be engagement for that process.
Right.
When we go through the long-term, or short-term rental.
The Airbnbs are not really an issue here because we're dealing with that.
We chose to deal with it separately, so what that means is we're stuck with dealing with this as it is without knowing what the rules for short-term rentals will be.
Except to the point, the expectation is in the licensing bylaw is that the ADUs will not be able to be used for short-term rental.
That's been my proposal all along.
Understood.
Yeah. Yeah, come on. Andre, you had a question, comment?
A big part of this plan, and we spent a lot of time on it, was the architectural control. Because under the current regulatory framework, we've had, even in this last year or so, we've had people build things as of right under the current plan that filled this room just as it is today, with people that were outraged. How could we allow this to happen? So we're trying to make changes here to improve that, to strengthen up, especially the architectural character of the village, which is of paramount importance. Not for just those who live in this village, but also those who are outside and that come to the village every day. So the idea that if you are outside council, you don't care about the village, I think that would be a flawed assessment. So we recognize that that's been an issue, and we're proceeding with this plan to try to, as I said, strengthen that up. Duplexes, such as the one that recently went up on Queen Street, under this plan can't be built, is that right, Eric? Because of the architectural control.
The way that it looks, right, would be different, yes.
It's impossible to build under any proposal here a duplex that actually looks like a duplex. They all look like single-family homes. You may have a little suite somewhere, but it will always look like a single-family home under this. And I think that's a big improvement. I wonder if we're really strictly talking about density, why do we care if a secondary unit is located in that same structure or if it's a separate little structure? Does that matter if we're genuinely talking about the water resource? If these zones right now allow 2 units, pretty much, R1 and R2 allow 2 units, pretty much as is right now, on almost every site, does it matter if the 2 units are joined or not joined? If really our concern is water? It seems like it's the same amount of water. So then it comes to what we want the built form to look like. Are we okay with having little structures? And if that little structure is an outbuilding, there's no issue. We can build little outbuildings right now. But if people live in them, we're angry about it. Are we? I don't know. I feel like the idea of an accessory dwelling unit through this process has become a villain. That, as Garth has rightly said, R1 allows them already. So really, we're just talking about accessory dwelling units in R2, and is that something we want? So let's say our reasoning before the public hearing was we would allow a secondary unit within the structure, and then you could have a separate dwelling unit that would be detached potentially or whatever. Let's say we scale that back and we just go back to, you can have up to 2 residences. A main one and then a smaller secondary one. Does it matter if it's inside the building or outside the building? That's a question I'm posing to council.
Tara, do you want to clarify?
I just want to ask Garth for some clarification. I think people are using the term accessory dwelling unit as a separate structure, meaning it's always outside. I think accessory dwelling unit in this context is exactly what you're talking about.
Let's go to the next slide. Just while you're saying, sorry.
I
please
think
continue.
it's exactly what you're talking about, is a second unit on the lot, whether it's in the main building or in a separate structure, which might be a garage that's already built and you're using a loft above it.
Yeah, it could be, exactly. It could be either, and then if you see on the right there, 4.21C, when located in the main building, the entrance to the accessory dwelling unit shall be located to the side or the rear.
So it's really a secondary dwelling unit,
Yeah.
those granny flats is what this
Yeah.
accessory dwelling unit is referring to.
What I like about if we're gonna allow like a multi-family sort of situation, when we use the accessory dwelling unit as it's written, is that it actually really limits the amount of water usage you could actually take, because how many people are you gonna put in up to 1,000 square feet? 2, realistically. 2. So like, it's that idea of generational homes where people have a home and they have children, they get older, their children have children, those people, they end up in the larger main home, they build the secondary small unit, their parents live there, they get old, their children, and it cascades through that way. And that's been very successful in other jurisdictions. It allows families to stay together, and in this economic climate, it's the only way for many families to actually maintain their homes and have, basically deal with their housing issues. And this is what this seeks to deal with. And I like this because instead of having a true duplex where you actually have 2 dwelling units that could be of equal size, it's designed to have just a smaller unit. And that would limit the amount of resources that we draw from the ground.
So yeah, that was one of the bullets, which would basically be to remove duplexes in the R2 zone and just allow one accessory dwelling unit per lot in both R1 as it is currently and in R2, which would be new, or you could say that's taking the ability to do a duplex, but instead of it being a duplex, it'd be a second dwelling unit, an accessory dwelling unit.
Yeah, I don't know precisely where we go from here, but I do know what I've heard. And that is that they don't want a lot of change that would impact the character of the village. And they don't want a lot of new structure.
And so the other option would be that other bullet there, which is to say no accessory dwelling units and single unit only in R1 and R2. I mean, that would be a step back from the density that's under the current plan.
I know that.
Oh yeah, no,
Okay.
if you know.
I think option
Pardon me?
one.
We could continue.
Well, no, yeah, basically, so those are the two sort of.
We have to,
yeah.
he's gonna go through a variety of things, we're going into the commercial zones and this
Yeah,
zone, and I
yeah.
don't wanna get it all confused, because it's complicated as it
I
is.
know.
So, yes, yeah,
So if we could give them some direction on the density
Right.
piece,
and-
before we move on to the next piece,
Yeah,
that
no.
might be helpful.
And that is council's option, and one, I do on one of the later slides here say, the other option is send this back to staff in a more substantial way, where we come back with a larger, re-engagement plan and rewrite and all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, then yes, I would really appreciate direction on each one of these items today.
Of course, I know you
Yeah.
would, because that's what you're looking for.
No, so
Us to tell
yeah.
you what
we're on the same
want us
page.
to do.
Yeah.
We may send the whole thing back to staff,
Well, anything's possible,
so it's not.
but even if we send it all back, we have to tell them what we want them to do.
Yeah, I do need some direction. Yeah.
I think we know what we're going to do.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Quite clear what we're going to do.
Yeah,
The issue,
and that matters to me.
the issue is
Yeah.
densification without a proven water resource to handle it, and that's the issue.
Well, there's that plus the character.
Well, the character, I think we've dealt with.
Well, I think we're actually doing better on that with the architectural control stuff, right?
Yeah, I think that's in there.
Yeah.
And if someone has something to show we can do better architecturally, tell us. But we've listened to almost all the concerns on architectural controls, and if we haven't, tell us. As far as we're concerned, it's density. Yeah, we get that.
Density is what their issue is.
And I think option one deals with
Addresses that.
Anyway, so.
Well, I mean, that's what I
I like option one too, because it really doesn't add any density to the current plan.
Yeah.
It's negligible.
And that's what.
And it layers on the architectural control.
Yeah, and that's another layer on top of that. Yeah. And we're going to deal with the commercial water, we're going to deal with
Yes.
east wind, we're going to deal with those things. I mean,
Yeah.
we know that.
Yeah, but we need, I just think that it'd be easier if we could just pick an option or tell them or something.
Yeah.
So are we heading towards option one?
I am leaning towards option one.
Well, it's your district, and that
Well, it's our
matters to
district.
me.
I represent it, but we.
I know, we all represent everybody, and that's,
Well, that's what we've done.
yeah, that seems to be what we've heard. So
Okay.
we're moving
So we'll
on
go
to
with
option one.
bullet one. Great. Okay. Thank you. Go a couple of slides here. You didn't actually need to get into all of those. So those are just some of the changes that I'll make to R2 to remove duplexes and the lot size coverages for duplexes. So yeah, we don't really need that. That was just the zoning map if we needed it. And okay, this is the next issue. So the next issue, which again you heard about briefly this morning, was the proposed expansion of the core commercial zone. And secondarily to that, the existing commercial zone on Valley Road, sort of a two-pronged. So loud and clear, there was the petition in support of not expanding the core commercial zone in the area of sort of Duke and Water Streets, as we heard. We also had some calls from residents in that same area that are currently commercial that wish to flip to residential. Some didn't realize that they were commercially zoned and they've been using it residentially. And then also we heard it again reiterated this morning, the call to remove the core commercial zone from Valley Road. There was particular concern expressed there around restaurants and bars and those sort of more intrusive uses that could create conflicts with residential in behind. So that is essentially what we heard around commercial. If we go 2 slides down, we'll get the map and we can see what we're talking about here. So there's sort of these 2 yellow circles. So the bottom yellow circle is roughly the area where the expansion was proposed. So that, if council wished to, we could just literally revert that back to how it was, so that there's a gap there. The institutional UCC, that's the Legion, just for context. So it's essentially that block in the yellow circle would go back to R2, and then the 2 commercial pieces would be separated. There wouldn't be a connection.
I got a question.
Yeah, sure.
If I may. And I may need Susan's help on this because I was looking for the petition. And I don't know if you have an extra copy of it. The property to the south, where the 2 apartment buildings used to be.
Yes.
We rezoned that.
That's commercial. Correct.
At the request of the owner.
Correct. And that's why I tried to leave it out of
So
the
that would be
circle
left
there.
out of the circle area. Unless they sign the petition.
No, we didn't, we weren't able to contact him. We didn't, so we don't know. We could ask him.
I think that, I mean, I don't want to take that out of the commercial where where we did a rezoning to make it commercial.
Right.
Without that owner's consent.
And this proposal wouldn't do
I
that.
didn't think it was on the petition, I just couldn't.
But this proposal would simply eliminate any additional commercial.
Right.
Along the water.
The first item we're here to talk about exactly is
But
just,
while we're doing it, if that owner now wishes to be residential, we could include it at this point. So I'd like to make contact with that. I don't even know who owns that lot now. But we can find that out. And,
that's something you'd like staff to do?
if I had the name, I don't mind doing it.
Okay, no, I'm just, yeah.
It may be better coming from staff. I don't know what the
But
appropriate.
you're generally in favor of removing the
Oh,
commercial from
yeah,
water.
I mean, I don't know how that got through in the first place. I mean, that is a resident.
Are we all good with that? We need to provide some direction.
Yeah.
Okay, so Water Street is no longer.
We'll just walk it back to how it was, and we'll contact what used to be the Risley property, I believe, to see if they would like to go to residential as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we still haven't dealt with Valley Road.
Right. So, so Valley Road is existing commercial today. That has existed as it sits today since at least the 2004 plan. I didn't look back further.
It always used to be.
Right, and reading the current plan and previous plans before the 2004 plan, the intent back then had been to create a connection between the sort of the highway commercial and the core commercial, and Valley Road was identified as that. Now, if that has changed, and we feel that because of the current land use and the desires of the community and council, we want to remove that is absolutely something we could do. I think the R2 zone would make sense to replace it, as it abuts it on both sides. But it's something that hadn't come up until last week. Yeah, so it was something that really hadn't been contemplated in a significant way by staff. I don't think, well, I certainly hadn't.
I don't know. I mean, I grew up with Valley Road being pretty much the commercial part of Chester.
And I mean, there's points both ways. I mean, there's we heard comments that, there's very little commercial there. And there are a few. There's the shop on Central, there's Big Reds, obviously, and then the Forsyth Gallery. So I think there is at least 3 or 4.
And then Nova Scotia Power Building, is commercial, obviously.
Right, that's true.
Jim said.
So
And there's a building where the food bank is commercial.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
that wouldn't reflect on that lot that was proposed for a hotel?
it would include that lot.
It would
Yes,
include that.
that's right. Yeah.
So what are people, Terry, where are you and that taking on?
Well, this is one that I haven't had a chance to talk to the residents of that, but I have had no pushback. The big concern there initially was the hotel could go up as a right. And under the new proposal, it couldn't be as a right, it would be development agreement.
That's correct.
So we did put some controls on that.
But now the concern is like restaurants and bars. But those are the sorts of things you'd expect in a commercial
Yeah.
zone. So you know, if you don't want commercial activities in this commercial zone, then that could be a problem.
Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense. I don't know that we can remove it totally, there's too much commercial there now.
Well, half of it is commercial.
Well, this is the trick, because, you know, if you have a property there and you intended it to be commercial, then,
Floyd,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
That's all right. No, I just want to clarify, am I hearing right when I heard that the first we started about this particular item this morning, that you didn't hear about this in your public meetings over the last 3 or 4 years, it was not an issue?
No, it was really at the public hearing last week that really arose, or in the, I guess, the submissions made in, you know, for the public hearing, yeah.
There were
Yeah.
real concerns expressed about the hotel.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
in particular, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I understood that part of it, the Valley Road.
But the larger request to sort of make all of Valley Road residential, that I think was, at least in my mind, was a newer idea.
Andre?
Like, I can understand, for example, if a restaurant or especially one with like entertainment or whatever were proposed adjacent to residential area, how that could be disruptive. Is there any way, but that could be the case anywhere really in the village. Is it unrealistic to require like above a certain number of seats by development agreement or something like that, so we actually have an opportunity to deal with disruptive commercial uses and still leave it as commercial, but just, you know, if it was a little cafe, nobody would care. But if it's, you know, a big tavern with, you know, Adela playing until 1 o'clock in the morning, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, then, you know, that could be a problem.
You would make it through Friday, Saturday.
So, you know, I'm just a suggestion, you know, to try to balance the concerns. I think the concern is the disruptive use. You know, nobody cares about Jim's Pottery Shop. That's no issue.
No, it depends on the type.
So, you know, is there a way that we could just add that balance to this proposed commercial zone?
The way it stands now, I don't know what's happening with the hotel.
Yeah,
It'll
there's
be on the agenda next week.
an application coming forward in relation to that property next week.
Yeah, no, and it's under the existing land use.
That's right, because, actually, that's a good point.
It's under both now, is it not?
No, because this is being sent back, it'll be under the existing. Yeah, that's one of the implications of delaying this review, is the existing rules are in effect until they're no longer.
So they will be able to put it there as of right.
I don't really want to speak to there's some change to what was initially proposed. It'll be part of the council package next week. I think that's all that's appropriate to say at this time.
We haven't put a freeze on it because we didn't adopt it.
That's right. Well, unless council passes it this morning, technically you've deferred your
It's
decision.
not a council meeting, it's a committee hall.
Right,
It's
but
we can't.
what I mean is there hasn't actually been a decision on the plan review documents yet. It's been deferred.
Yeah.
Yes. So they're.
But presuming that we're going to,
Everything in the whole world is functioning on the existing land use bylaw at the moment, until we adopt it.
Yes.
The
well,
application is in.
unless council passed the documents that they held the public hearing on last week, in which case this application would be
Which we are
subject.
not.
Okay, then yes, I can definitively answer your question. Yeah. Okay. So it will be under the existing.
Yeah. So what do we want to do with Valley Road?
So we do, just to some of Councilor Vino's comments, we do have anything that is not a restaurant, so that does serve alcohol, requires a development agreement in that zone, but restaurants do not. So to your point, we could either do it based on some sort of size, or just in general say all restaurants require a development agreement.
Yeah, I mean, if we were a coffee shop, probably most people would be happy, not angry. But if it were, as I said, some sort of night entertainment, they're trying to enjoy a peaceful evening, and 3 a.m. is if they're banging around until 3 a.m., that would be a problem.
So I guess from staff's point of view, the question would be, is it the beverage room, like the alcohol piece of it, that is the concern, or is it the size of our restaurant
Yeah.
that doesn't serve alcohol? Because right now, there's no limit, they would be,
The restaurant would go by
the
permit.
restaurant would go by permit. If
Yeah.
it was serving alcohol, it would go by development agreement.
Not quite.
No.
If the restaurant served alcohol, it would go by permit. Restaurants go by permit. Anything else, like a bar or a
Okay.
tavern or a lounge that doesn't serve,
Okay.
that isn't a
As long as they
restaurant.
serve
Yeah.
good food.
So, right, yeah, no, I know, and it is, yeah,
So it has to have a restaurant component with it in order to go by development.
permit, right. And if that was the direction we could change that.
I mean, the biggest deal would be with setbacks and buffers for vegetation, things like that to make it,
And those are the kind of things that you probably would, through the development agreement, you would have a little more
yeah.
control.
I think if we were going to allow commercial there at all, it should be through development agreement, so that we can control it in a much better way. But that's not really great. I mean, to me, it's relatively commercial as is.
Get the map, I think, in regard for that.
Yeah, I think that's.
Oh, I guess where is the map located?
There we go.
Can you zoom in a bit on
Down the road, Lanford's to Chester.
I think it's almost any kind of, anything that would be operating into the evening. I think that you almost need to
Yeah.
have it by development agreement. I think that's the issue.
And development agreement does also give us the option to do hours of operation with.
It gives us a lot more flexibility in how we determine what is.
So review, that's kind of what I'm hearing, I think, is review the uses and anything that may kind of run into the evening or has a higher potential for disruption,
Yeah.
go by development agreement. That will obviously affect the entirety of the zone, but that, it's fair to say there's residential uses around all of our commercial zoning, so.
Okay.
Okay,
I believe, sorry, just for clarity, I believe right now the way we deal with restaurants and bars is we don't separate cafes out from what
Right.
would be considered restaurants, so you need to look at that piece.
But yeah, I think if we do that hours of operation, that would probably deal with that because those guys aren't
Yeah.
going until late. Good.
okay, okay, next.
I don't know if we want to deal with this or not, actually, sorry, Emily, can you just go back 2 slides sorry, this one, okay. Because we're dealing with density, I felt it was prudent to mention density that's allowed in the core commercial zone. This specifically didn't come up, obviously the discussions were around residential zones, the R1 and the R2, but I just wanted to make it explicitly clear so that if this plan goes through, there's no surprise after the fact. So this is, in terms of residential uses, what's allowed in the core commercial zone as written today. So 1 to 4 dwelling units in the same structure that also contains a commercial use. So that's reflective of sort of Pleasant Street where you'd have apartments in behind or on top of a storefront. And then we also have 5 to 10 units by development agreement. And that was a change we made to the current plan, so that's in effect today. This is not changing in this plan. I just wanted to draw it to attention. If we're changing density in other zones, do we want to look at this or do we want to leave it as is? So
It's existing.
it's existing. It is existing. But I just wanted to highlight. I didn't want to, brush past it. That said, and obviously as it's written there, anything more than 4 would require the development agreement. So that's when we're, again, into that more controlled and public facing process.
Are we comfortable leaving it, it's existing?
And we didn't really hear much about that, I don't think, in terms of the core commercial zone itself. It was really focused on R1 and R2.
Just a question, I mean,
Sorry.
I don't know if we control it by a development agreement, but someone at the hearing mentioned about it's way away, but a community that insisted that people had cisterns for new development because of water problems. Could we enact something like that in the core area, or is that something that we can't?
I don't know, is the frank answer. I have some doubts that the MGA would give us that ability, but that would need some review.
But if we're going to do it, we're likely to be by development agreement.
Yes, that's what I was thinking, by development agreement or something, I don't know, it was brought up,
So we could have water testing done, and if it appears that they needed that, then we may be able to add that in through the development agreement.
Just to, because,
Possibly, yeah. Again, there's some,
I know.
and Sam and I would need to have a look at
I
things
mean,
there.
there's a lot, but people are very concerned about water.
That, and that was also made in response to residential, so that would be saying that each new house needs a cistern. That's talk about increasing the cost of construction. Yeah.
But we-
Would it be almost at that
We
point?
have a water program where we will lend people money to put in.
Sure. At that point, I might say it's better to just not allow development rather than require people to put in that kind of a water system.
Andre?
If there's any place in the village that has water, it's probably Valley. But,
Valley Road.
but
an assumption.
I think we need to talk about water a bit here, and it goes beyond this current plan. It has to do with our philosophy about water. Because, as you are aware, we have no water system in our municipality, so therefore every single property in our municipality is on a well. So when I hear council throw around ideas like, well, we should do water tester, we should, require, what is it exactly is the threshold by which council will decide when proof has been made that that there is adequate water for a development to proceed? I, as an engineer that works in this every day, it's still foggy exactly what it is that council will accept as proof. Because no matter where you are in the world, when you dig or drill a well, it is a gamble. It is always a gamble. It is a gamble for a single family home. It is a gamble for a multi-unit dwelling. It is a gamble for a commercial operation. You never know exactly what you're going to get, even if you're a hydrogeologist. You don't know for sure what you're going to get until you do it. Every time. So when we do reports and we say we've reviewed, did a desktop review, and we've assessed all of the well logs in the area, and an engineer provides a report that says, based on all these other wells, this is what we would expect. Is that sufficient for this council going forward when a development is proposed? If we are to drill a well and there is no activity on it, we just drill a well and we look at the well and there's water in there, well, what is its effect on its neighbors? If we were to draw it down, we don't know until the development is there. We can do multiple wells, and we can do something like a 20 to 72-hour pump down test, like what was done out in Stanford, like in that development, where we have one well and then we go a prescribed distance away and we drill another one, and we can pump one well down for 72 hours straight, and we can measure the effect on the other well. We can do that, but in smaller developments, that was a huge development with a lot of land. If you're doing one lot, where do you put the other well? How is it possible to do this assessment? So I think we as a council have to decide what proof is adequate, because as developments come forward, we're going to be continually confronted by those who will oppose any development, because in any development there will always be those that aren't in favor for a variety of reasons. But no matter what it is, because we have no water system, we will always be hit with the water stick. And we have to decide what proof is going to be adequate for us when we proceed. And we have to be, it has to be based on some sort of sound logic, because that's going to exist in every single development we do. It doesn't matter if it's a single family home, 12-unit building, or larger. What is adequate? Everything is going to be unknown. We have to accept that. And I want to have that discussion. I don't know if it's here or wherever, but you're never going to have definitive, yes, it's going to be for sure perfect. It's impossible to do that. But we can't obviously do nothing in our municipality. So we have to decide what level of risk is going to be acceptable to our council and our community when we go forward with any development. We have to be sincere about that. And once we decide this is the threshold, then that is the threshold. You do this thing, if it turns out good, the report or whatever it is, then we proceed. If it's not, you don't. And I don't know where that ends up, if it's in this document, but at some point we have to address it.
So it's not in the development agreement now about water, nothing.
Well, it's vague.
There is. It says, there's a few different places, but, council shall be confident the proposal is not premature or inappropriate to a poor supply of on-site water for domestic uses or for firefighting. That's one. There are a couple others I could, if you bear with me, I can find those. But they're all in that same sense, that it's not to Councilor Rito's point, with a professional report from a qualified professional, that kind of thing is the type that we would currently, like that tabletop study to say, well, logs indicate there should be sufficient water in the area. Those are the kinds of things that we've accepted, mostly outside of the village, because we haven't done development agreements in the village recently, but yeah. So
The concern I have is that prior to 2004, we used to use development agreements somewhat. And then we tried to change our policies and made it sort of like an as of right sort of arrangement with land use. And what we saw over the last 20 years is that there were a lot of things that made sense that we just couldn't do, because when we created the as of right rules, we didn't think of every scenario, which is quite reasonable. And then, it was too inflexible. We couldn't allow things that made sense. We couldn't even allow a cupola to be put on the art house because
We had to change the rules.
we didn't change the rules to make that happen. So it was so inflexible we could do nothing. So now we're trying to move back towards development agreements so that we can allow things that would work well in our community. But no matter what happens, every development,
There's always a risk.
there's going to be a risk around water. And so what is the threshold? What is the metric by which this council will say we have adequately addressed this risk? We need to decide what that is, because that water stick, we're going to get hit with it every time.
Yeah, but we can't decide without a proper water study.
But what is that proper water study?
You're the engineer, you tell me.
I'm trying to tell you.
I know.
You don't know.
No, usually you would do a jurisdictional scan of neighboring wells and well logs, because that's realistically those are actual data of real things.
We may have to go down that road, but we can't do that right this second.
That's important to this conversation. Because we as a council are going to be, we've been lucky enough for the last 20 years that we haven't had the controversy of development agreements. Every single development agreement comes, there's going to be some parties that are for and others that are against. And it's very comfortable when everything's as of right, because it comes in, it goes through staff. If people don't like it, you throw up your hands and say, well, you were here when we made the rules, they're conformed to the rules, so what are you mad at me for? Well, that's great. But now we're going to have the option to say yes or no at this council, and we're going to make some people mad, and we're going to make some people happy.
Does the threshold go in the plan?
Well, I think that we have, I don't know if it has to be that. We can make it prescriptive, or we can at least decide this is the level that we'd expect. Now, on a big development like Stanford Lake, the 72-hour pump down test like that's a big test, an expensive one. And it makes sense because it's a huge geographic area and you can do that. But if you're just developing a single lot in the village, you can't do that test. So then how do you, like if somebody wants to do whatever, let's say 10 units as of right over commercial on Valley, how do you decide that there's adequate water? Well, the only thing realistically, you can drill a hole in the ground and look and say, yeah, there's water down there. Of course it is, it's in the valley. But how will that affect the neighbors when you start drawing 10 residences worth of water out? Well, the only way to look is to look at the yields of all your neighbors. That's how you would normally do that from an engineering standpoint. So, but we have to then say, well, that's adequate for us as a council, as a proof. But that means that people won't, there's never a for sure thing. So we have to be willing to say, well, that's as far as we can realistically ask for. I'd be okay with that.
I just don't know how we respond to that today.
I mean, yeah, so fair question. I mean, we do have a stormwater standard in the documents. So if at some point there was an agreed upon standard, even if that was to dictate the level of report or that kind of thing required. We could absolutely put it in this document or not. And again, without it, we've got these sort of, vague statements that, reports from a qualified professional that, drinking water source will not negatively impact the quality and quantity of water resources. But as you've just heard, that's very...
And we may need to amend that, but I just don't know how we resolve that today, because I don't really know what the answer is. Do I?
Now, to resolve it today, we'd have to do a study, or we would have to...
Yeah, there's a lot more working time.
Some more working time, but I think we can agree that...
It needs to be done.
And we'll proceed with it. I think we need to make a commitment.
Well, I think, and we'd want to be clear on what that is too, because a lot has been made of the CBCL preliminary groundwater study from 2017, and it's been alleged that I didn't. I've read that study many times. I'm familiar with it, and depending on your outlook, it says different things. And what it doesn't have says this area shouldn't have development. This area should. It doesn't get to that level of specificity. And if you looked at the other 2017 study that CBCL did on where the water system should go, it does have a map, but it's focused on existing density. As in, that's where the pipes would be most, financially feasible, and you'd get the most bang for your buck. So what we don't have is the study that says this is where the water is not, the aquifer is. And I am not an engineer, so I don't know. Yeah, that may be $1 million study. I have no idea what's required to get that. But that is, I think, what you're speaking of, Councillor Wells. But that's a big
You can drill two wells on your own lot. One of them has water, the other one doesn't.
Right. Yeah. But if we're talking to actually understand what's under the entire village, that's much.
But just a bigger picture.
Yeah.
But I think a commitment to try to do our best to come up with some policy and regulation associated with that.
Yep.
We need to do something.
I mean, I won't be here to do it, but the next councillor, I think, should commit to getting commitment to get hydrologists to come in and have a chat with us about what the options are and what the standards would be and what the...
How can we possibly come up with a better policy
before we spend the $1 million? But I think we need to bring in a hydrologist or whoever these people are. Andre, what do we bring in?
Billy Shaw's been here lots of time, I bring him down.
He's doing our working hours.
I think we need to have that person. I think we need to make that commitment as part of this whole process.
Yeah. That's fair enough, but just that I know we aren't going to fix that right this minute.
No,
Can it just not be a civil matter between neighbors if there's a problem?
I can't allow the public to speak. Okay, Garth, where are we?
Okay, so so Valley, we're going to review the commercial zone for those list of uses. Anything that kind of goes into the evening or has higher potential for disruption, we'll look to put through development agreement as opposed to permit, and we'll leave the zoning on Valley as it exists, I think is what I heard.
Yeah.
But we will revert it in the Water Duke area.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one, which we heard, we actually didn't hear. No one spoke to this at the hearing. There were folks there who I expected to, but they didn't. But there was a significant amount of written submissions.
Lots of written. I think everybody knows from Seawinds.
Just about, yeah. So this is Seawinds subdivision. Essentially, this is an area in the sort of the outer village area. It's a primarily single unit subdivision, although there are, again, as with most of this plan, there is the ability currently to do a residential conversion to make a single unit into 2 units through that special clause. Actually, Emily, can you just flip to the next slide for just a sec, just so everybody's familiar. So yellow circle, just to show us where, so this is just off of Haddon Hill Road. Under the current plan, the 2004 plan, that subdivision was zoned single unit residential. Under the proposed plan, they, as you can see on the zoning map, they're included in the R3 zone, which would allow up to 3 units by right on the lot. And we heard again that they don't want the change, and that level of density, they feel that, and it's true that most of the lots are developed already in that subdivision, and so looking to maintain the existing general character and density levels that they have. Again, just a couple of options to get us started here. One would be, and I guess just maybe a little bit more context. So the single unit zone that these folks had used to exist in a couple of other subdivisions, but in 2020, when we revised the zoning boundaries as part of the municipal plan review, those other areas now fall under the municipal plan. So this was the only remaining single unit zone in the village plan. We have the R1 zone, which is kind of like a single unit zone, but it's not the same. It has those larger 1 acre lot sizes and that kind of thing. So this was sort of a remnant there. And that didn't mean that it couldn't stay on its own, but that was just some of the thinking there. So what we were looking to do was to blend that into what had previously been the low density zone into the R3 zone. In terms of options here, we could create basically what most of the requests were for was to basically put them back to what they were. So we could create, we'd call it the R3 zone, and then we would change the existing R3 to R4 and R4 to R5. What option one would be to allow a single unit dwelling plus one accessory dwelling unit. So that would align with.
To be a big issue.
I don't want to speak for them, but that would align with the decisions we've just made.
Better than the 3 units.
And it would also be, if we were going to not allow the accessory dwelling unit there, they would then be the most restrictive in the village, more so than the R1 zones, and we've just made that decision. So that would be the first is basically give them back their own zone. That would be single unit plus one accessory. The other option that I was considering there would be to look at the R3 zone as a whole and bring that maybe down from 3 units to 2 units as of right, and then leave CWIN subdivision as R3.
Okay, Andre has his hand up.
I've had a few weeks to think about this, so my opinions changed a couple times, at least inside my own mind. So some time ago, probably maybe 2 years ago, we sort of resolved that we wanted to do these protections inside the village because it makes Chester special, all architectural control, everything else. And but balancing that against the recognition that we have a housing shortage right now, and we need to allow that development somewhere. So this is where we've sort of come and we've said, okay, well, the number 3 is kind of the demising line. On the other side of the 3, we could probably do more density over there. On this side of the 3, the Chester Peninsula and coves and things, harbors, we should try to control it more. And this is the discussion we've had so far this morning. It's good. And there's a portion of that out the commons that is serviced by on-site sewage that we currently allow up to 11 units as of right per lot. And that continues. And this is not just in this plan, but actually this is going back to the previous plans. We've been able to do that kind of density out that way. And this request to change the zoning up Haddon Hill, these are lots that most of them I think, are serviced by sewage.
That's correct.
So they have the capacity from a sewage standpoint. They have the capacity from a sewage standpoint to actually handle density. They are not in the Chester Peninsula. And of course, we received some commentary from those residents that they don't want to see any additional density, but I'm sure if we polled the people out on the Chester Commons that do you want a multi-unit building next to you, I'm sure none of them would say yay, me. But where are we going to allow development in our municipality? Because it's no good to say, well, we're going to allow density, but only out in Chester Grant or out the Windsor Road, because that's not. People need to be somewhat close to amenities. So you have to pick some area where you can allow some density, and this, I realize there is some character to that area that's primarily single-family homes now, but if we expect density, if we have a need for density somewhere, and we say, okay, well, the Chester Peninsula is off limits, then we gotta put somewhere. And, you know, Haddon Hill, where it's serviced by sewer, is kind of an obvious location from an engineering standpoint. I'm not saying put up high rises there, but I mean, like there was a lot of outcry about a triplex. Well, you know, if you can't allow a triplex there, but you can put one on a septic system out on the commons. You can put 11 units on a lot on the commons on a septic system, and here you got a town sewer on Haddon Hill, and you can't even, and we're mad because we don't want to put 3 units there. As a right, does that make sense? Honestly, I mean, I get it. Whenever there's going to be infill in any lands, there's going to be those that don't want it next to them. But we have to take those. We have to hear those concerns as a council, but we have to think. The people will only think, of course, of their own interests, but we have to think also of the interests of the people that aren't able to speak to us because they don't live there yet. They don't have a house, they're on somebody's couch.
Isn't this mostly already built?
Yes, I
Yes.
would,
Yeah.
Please.
I would support leaving it as is. They clearly spoke, they didn't want it to change. It's a
They certainly don't want
subdivision.
3 units, that's for sure.
Yeah, they sure don't want 3 units. If anything, the new zone with an ADU, but other than that, I wouldn't support it. I mean, they clearly didn't want it. As far as development, I guess that's where Stanford Lake will probably be the closest to the village that will have development and in the outskirts. It seems to be the new reality. And we'll have to accept that.
Derek and then Andre again.
I like option 1. I thought about it as well. I went back and reread most of the letters, although there is one letter missing, not missing. I've read it and I can't put my hands on it. That's the one Jim Gordon referred to. I've read all that. If someone can find that for me, I want to address Jim's issues. But right now, I like option 1. I think the new zone with the single unit dwelling and the ADU without the architectural controls.
That seems to be what's acceptable to the people that live there.
But is it not, I mean, how much, Garth, how many empty lots are out there? Are we talking about conversions that we leave the same?
And that, I don't, it's just less than 5 empty lots left in the subdivision. Most, it is, and that was made in some of the correspondence we heard that, yeah, it is primarily built up currently, yeah.
Yeah, I like option 1.
That's where you are as well, here.
Well, I think so.
Other people? Yeah, we'll vote. That's Andre.
So when we did the municipal plan and we went out to do our large zoning, because at that point, pretty much all of the municipality was general basic. And we went out and we did community consultations to say, what is it that you envision for the future of our municipality? What would you like this, how do you think that our community should evolve? We had people come in, we had big meetings. You know what we heard? They described to us exactly what it is that they were doing today. Whenever you go out and you do community consultation, you know what you're going to hear? A description, you're going to actually get to hear exactly what they're doing today. So yes, we need to hear that. It's important if we didn't know. But, you know, going forward, you have to also think about what it is that we need for the future. You know, it's a bit cowardly, honestly, if all we do is just pander to those people that are voicing their own interests. I'm not saying discard those opinions, but we also have to think to those that aren't here today that will have needs in the future. And, you know, maybe the decision is right here to proceed with option 1 or whatever. But going forward, as we make these decisions, we have to be thinking more than just about what we're hearing from residents. Because that's an input, but we also have to, but you're not going to hear any of the residents going to say, well, these are what the needs are going to be in 20 years, 30 years, 40. It's impossible to expect that of people. That's our job and our staff's job to think about what the needs are going to be long term. So I just want to say that, and I'm fine if it's the will of this council to proceed with this, but this is going to continually be a problem as we change planning and stuff like to address housing shortages. You have to think about more than just the needs of those people that are there today.
But at the same time, unless we address the water issue, we're not going to be able to do some of the things that we would like to do. That's what's holding us back. Twice the community voted against it, I get that. But I believe that we still have to pursue some option for water that will allow us to do greater density.
I agree.
Right now, we don't have
100%. But there's no water shortage. That's not a water issue out here.
Anyway,
There's more of a
it appears as though the first option seems to be where we're headed.
Okay.
Just that we're way past.
Oh, sure, yeah.
9:30 appointment.
Yep.
Nancy, are you being a rush or? No?
I'm good.
You're good?
Take your time.
Okay, keep going then.
Okay, and I think this is, we're getting there.
Get the other shit.
So the next one, actually, and this was great that you heard from this morning, because I don't know that this came out in speaking comments at the public hearing, is around the R4 zone. And so this is the new zone that's proposed in along Highway 3, in addition to the highway commercial zone, where more density has been permitted by right. Up to 8 units was proposed to be permitted by right in the R4 zone. As you heard this morning, again, calls and questions on allowing this style and number of units. Again, the second comment is, I guess, sort of my own, with thinking about if we're reducing density and additional units throughout the plan, as we've been doing this morning, it's probably prudent to at least consider this zone, as I wanted to point out with the core commercial zone. When this plan was created, it was done with a hierarchy of zones that built upon each other and provided different options in different housing types in different areas. It could leave some strange remnants if we don't make changes accordingly to have that still structured. So if we're like single unit across the board and then you can go up to 8 when you just cross the road, that may not make sense anymore. Per Councillor Vino's points here, I think we want to have some sort of a logical and strategic approach to this and not just be doing willy-nilly things in different areas based on what we're hearing. If we're hearing strongly enough we need to reduce, I think we should look at reductions across the board. And so I wanted to highlight the R4 zone for consideration there. We've also heard from the development community as we've gone through this process that small apartment buildings, currently at least, are not financially feasible to build like a 6-unit apartment building. It's either you go really big or you look at a different form like townhousing or single, or not single unit, but single story development. Again, here, just some thoughts for discussion. We could reduce the number of units by permit, by right, from 8 to 4. That would still allow, more density by right than most of our zones and most do today. We could also replace the R4 zone with the R3 zone, which would probably provide about a similar level of development potential in that area as it does today, but it would be a reduction from the R4 zone as proposed. And obviously these zones will get renumbered because we're just going to do the R3, but yeah.
Can we show the map?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
I can't remember.
I know, yeah, sorry. So the R4 is the dark red up along Highway 3.
Oh, yeah.
And that, under the current plan, is in our medium density residential zone, which is the highest density zone we have under the current plan. So I think it makes sense that area be prioritized, but it's just what's the number? Yeah, exactly.
So for context, Gareth, that's like out towards Tim Hortons, all of that, or would that go?
Yeah, so that's Tim Hortons would be under that HC, the light purple zone. So that's Old Trunk 3 there is going up diagonally. Yep, and so it's really it's north of Highway 3. And then up towards the Windjammer property, and Able Engineering would be included in there. So primarily north of the highway, but within the village boundary. So from about the mall to to Duke Street, I guess. Is,
Sort of a mix of commercial, residential, you know.
That's right, and as you can see there, it's, you know, sort of one side of the street might be highway commercial, the other side might be this sort of higher density zone.
Well, if you're gonna allow density anywhere, those are.
That's the place to do it, I'd say.
Yeah, and so there's nothing saying we have to
Just a
change.
question of how much.
Yeah, that's right. And again, I think it's fair to say this was something we hadn't heard a lot about until quite recently.
Yeah.
We had in 2022, I think it was, late in the summer of 2022, we did a workshop specifically around the Highway 3 area and these new zones, which included 8 units by right, highway commercial zone, landscaping requirements, and all the other kind of things that we did there. Generally, it was well received at that session, but that was a couple years ago, so yeah, hard to say. And sometimes word spreads at different speeds.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So again, kind of like the core commercial, I just wanted to.
Cable speed?
Yeah.
What happened?
I'm just trying to exclude it from that. We keep talking.
So, if we were to even go to 4 units, more than what's allowed now?
It is, yeah. It would still be, again, in the context of this plan as it's being revised on the fly here, that would still allow sort of the most density by right without going through a development agreement like we talked about in the core commercial zone. You could do 10 units, but that's a development agreement process. So,
What would be the limit to development agreement?
8, under his first option, I think.
yeah, we currently in the R4 zone, it's written that more than 8 goes by development agreement.
No, it'd be more than 4.
It would be more than 4 unless we wanted to put an upper limit on it.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to be sure.
But yeah, no, that's a good clarification.
Well, it's more than they initially had. I would recommend moving from the first one, reduce from 8 to 4.
Why?
Why? Why not?
Well, you go over that dashed line and you can do 11 as of right. And here we're serving with sewer, and we're over the number 3, so we're away from the architecturally sensitive area of Chester. So I'm not sure why are we not allowing development? So just this was the entire philosophy that we worked towards. So we're actually away from the village. And this was our plan. We set it up. Why we're going down.
Yes, I heard that.
Floyd, I sort of agree, believe it or not, I agree with you. But I do, just because we're really reducing things in the village core.
Yes.
Have a lot of fun there. I think leaving it up there at 8 makes a lot of sense because we're doing such a reduction in the village. There needs to be somewhere to expand in that area, so I sort of agree.
You're still gonna be able to do 8 by development agreement, so you're not prohibiting it, you're just putting free will controls in.
It's gonna, I guess what I hear a lot is it's hard to get things done, red tape, getting going process and all that. And I see it as a bit of a red flag.
What are you allowed to do by right now?
I don't have that document with me, I apologize. Medium density residential zone.
So it's not 8?
It's not 8, no, it's not. It's not that much. It's a couple by right, and then I think there's maybe the ability for site plan approval to get a few more.
So the first option is 4 would be by right, and you can go as much as 8 with development agreement.
Well, as it's written now, option 1 would be 4 by right. Currently, it says it would be 4 or more by development agreement, but we could put it up there. So right now, as it's written, it's up to 8 by right, and then it's 8 or more by development agreement.
Well,
So we could make this 4 by right,
and then 8 by development agreement.
More than 4 by development.
Well, that's the question. Do we say more than 4 without an upper cap, or do we want to have an upper cap on the number of units? That's a second question.
Oh, okay, so I'm so glad that the Social Housing Action Coalition is going to get up and speak next.
I was actually looking forward to
I
going
just wish
after.
they had gone first.
I know, yeah, agreed, agreed.
Where are we going to put housing people? We don't want it in the core of the village. You know, we got to put it somewhere, and like they don't want to be out in the woods. You know, they gotta go to the grocery store and stuff.
They've always nice to do sidewalks.
So like, I mean, and the trouble with, honestly, the trouble with just pretty strict units actually is usually it's tied to lots, and the lot size is actually a consideration in most cases. So if you have a little tiny lot, it's actually entirely inappropriate to put a whole ton of units on it, and then you could have a big one, and it could be totally inappropriate. So that's one of the little nuances to this whole discussion that we're having. But, you know, I really don't see the reason to reduce this by right, because it's really difficult as a developer when you're trying to put this deal together. You got the financing piece, you're trying to buy land, you don't know what it's capable of, that stretches the timelines out by literally 6 months before the time that you actually conceive the idea, to actually getting that permit in hand. At the same time, you're trying to like hold this whole, you're trying to keep the arse on her, this deal. It's really hard.
Yeah, Tara has the existing.
Oh, thank you.
So development permitted subject to the medium density residential zone standards allows single unit, 2-unit dwellings, parks, and group homes. And then subject to other requirements of the bylaw, which is section 4.10, which is the site plan approval area for Highway 3. You're allowed to do small scale business uses. You're allowed to do any form of residential development containing no more than 12 dwelling units in a building and otherwise would otherwise not be permitted in accordance with the requirements of 410. So up to 12 units, and it's by site plan.
Site plan. So if we made that by development agreement, that would actually be worse. Yeah, more of a challenge. Yeah.
So that's existing right now.
Existing right now, you're allowed to do up to 12 by site plan.
What would be the issues leaving it alone?
Currently, it only allows up to 2 by right.
Just thought you said.
And 12 by site plan.
And 12 by site
plan.
I mean, that's not a.
It's not a
I'm okay with site plan.
Yeah, that just shows where
Okay, so we'll take it back to 2 by right and anything above that by side. I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Site plan's not a particularly cumbersome thing.
It depends who you ask. It does still.
If you ask somebody to fill in a form, it's a pain to some people, but you know.
I want to hear what you're going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say, it does still involve engineering and stormwater management plans, and potentially traffic studies and all. So I'm not trying to argue, I'm just trying to say it's a big step above a development permit. There's a big difference between permit
But
and
I
site.
actually think that if you're going to do like up to 12 units, you know, speaking from the development community, that you should have a site plan.
Yeah, you should.
But the DA is another whole.
Right, and that opens it to
That's a whole
public discussion as well. Right.
So even as
Do we
it is.
1 to 4 and then 4 to 12 by site plan?
That's what it is now.
No, it's 1 to 2 right now.
But I think
I'm suggesting 1 to 4.
1 to 4, and after that up to 12
By site plan, sure, yeah, we can make that change.
Drainage issues, the parking, the separations, the this, the that.
Sure,
Okay,
great, I
that's
think,
where we're going?
I think that's good.
We gotta get going.
Good compromise, yeah.
We don't have to get going.
No, I know, but-
As long as we have to do it.
Yes, I
We're
know.
not gonna push this.
No.
So that was the last slide that I had. So basically, I just wanted to give the opportunity if there was anything else. Like I said, I think those capture the major subjects that we hadn't already really dealt with yet that came up at the hearing. But if there was anything else, happy to discuss that. I know we have the one additional piece on some sort of a standard or criteria for the water report. So I'll see what I can come up with that in addition, but otherwise I have direction on the 4 items that I was looking for, so just.
Yeah, if we could do something a little more prescriptive of what it is that we would expect, a proposal for a water study, that would be good. Because I think that it's a real weakness and what it is that we're accepting. And the vagueness is on both sides, both the development side and from the community's perspective, what is reasonable to ask. There are no sure things with wells.
Do our best. Okay,
Okay,
thank you much.
Thanks, Eric.
thank you.
We're taking a 5-minute break because I know some people have to possibly use the washroom.
Take some drugs.
Well, I'm